Many years ago, in a quiet and humble village called Nakuru, there lived a young girl named Lina, whose life began with deep sorrow, as her mother died only moments after bringing her into the world due to severe childbirth complications, leaving Lina to grow up without ever knowing the warmth, comfort, or tenderness of a mother's embrace. And when she turned 4, her father, Darius, in an attempt to rebuild a family and perhaps escape his own loneliness, remarried a woman named Helena, who at first glance seemed charming, gentle, and soft-spoken, but beneath her graceful exterior hid a heart that was cold, calculating, and filled with an unspoken bitterness that would soon be unleashed on the innocent child. When Helena later gave birth to her own daughter, Raya, Lina was overjoyed and her heart swelled with pure, innocent excitement because she dreamed of becoming the perfect big sister, ready to love, protect, and care for the baby as if she were her own flesh and blood. However, every time Lina tried to come near the little girl, Helena would pull Raya away sharply and remind Lina, sometimes with a mocking smirk, sometimes with an icy, cruel indifference, that she was motherless, unwanted, and unworthy of such affection, which caused Lina to run to her father in tears again and again. Yet Darius, already worn down, intimidated, and emotionally silenced by Helena's dominance within the household, felt completely powerless to defend his daughter and gradually retreated into a sorrowful helplessness that left Lina more alone than ever. As the years slowly passed, both girls grew into young women, but while one was pampered and adored, the other was oppressed and exhausted. Raya blossomed effortlessly, attended to like royalty, her every need met, every wish granted, while Lina was pushed into a life of endless labor, forced to fetch firewood under the blazing sun, haul water from the river with heavy clay pots that dug into her shoulders, cook meals for the entire family, scrub and clean every corner of the house, wash clothes until her hands were sore, and endure long, grueling days with barely enough food to sustain her. And even though her body ached and her heart grew heavier with each passing day, she rarely complained, choosing instead to carry her pain in silence, even as her spirit dimmed little by little under the weight of constant injustice. Darius watched this painful imbalance grow before his eyes, and inside him, regret accumulated like a dark storm, because he realized too late that his decision to remarry had not brought the protection and stability he hoped for Lina, but instead had opened the door to cruelty and oppression. The stress of this realization, combined with Helena's relentless control of the household, weighed heavily on his mind and body, and eventually his health failed him. His blood pressure rose dangerously high, and one tragic evening, overwhelmed and weakened, he collapsed and passed away, leaving Lina fully orphaned and completely at the mercy of Helena and Raya, who no longer felt the need to hide their disdain and now treated her as nothing more than a servant, or even less. During this time, when Lina was enduring her harshest days, the kingdom began to buzz with exciting news. The Prince of Nakuru, who had left the village at the tender age of 6 to study in distant lands, was finally returning home after many years abroad, and according to tradition, upon his return, he was required to choose a bride from among the young women of the village. The king's loyal and trusted secretary, Kato, received the responsibility of selecting 6 suitable girls who would live in the palace for 2 whole months, during which the prince would silently observe them and ultimately choose one to become the future queen. When the list of names was announced, Helena rejoiced with fierce pride and satisfaction upon hearing that Raya had been chosen, and her heart burned with ambition as she imagined her daughter ascending to the throne. But the moment she realized Lina's name was also on the list, her happiness turned instantly into burning anger, boiling inside her like hot oil ready to spill, though outwardly she forced herself to smile and pretend to be pleased, hiding her true feelings behind fake sweetness. Determined that Rhea would outshine everyone and win the prince's heart, Helena went to great lengths to prepare her daughter for palace life. She bought luxurious skincare creams and fragrant oils, taught her how to apply them in careful routines, selected the finest perfumes, and ensured Rhea's skin became smooth, radiant, and luminous like polished marble under the sun. Meanwhile, Lina was deliberately neglected and sabotaged, as Helena forced her to bathe only once every 2 days, increased her workload so she would appear constantly exhausted, thin, pale, and worn out, and gave her the most basic and worn-out clothes. All of Helena's actions were carried out with the cruel and calculated intention of ensuring that Lina would appear as unattractive, exhausted, and unworthy as possible in the eyes of the prince and everyone at the palace, so that the mere sight of her would eliminate her from consideration before she even opened her mouth. A kind-hearted villager named Mina, who had quietly observed Lina's suffering over many years, the silent tears, the endless chores, the harsh words, the isolation, finally reached a point where she could no longer stand by without intervening, and so one afternoon she confronted Helena and Rhea directly, telling them in a firm but compassionate voice that the world was unpredictable, that destiny often took unexpected turns, and that one should never mistreat an innocent person, because the very girl they looked down on today might one day rise far higher than either of them could ever imagine. But Helena, blinded by arrogance and contempt, merely scoffed, declaring that the thought of Lina rising was absurd, that Rhea alone was destined for greatness, and that Lina would forever remain nothing more than a worthless shadow in their lives. On the night before the journey to the palace, Lina withdrew into her small, bare room, a place that had witnessed countless tears, and she knelt quietly on the hard floor, her heart overflowing with pain, fear, and longing. As tears streamed down her cheeks, she whispered a trembling prayer, asking God to protect all mothers so that no child anywhere would ever have to feel the crushing loneliness she had felt her entire life, and begging him to grant her the strength to keep moving forward, despite the weight on her shoulders. And although her eyes grew swollen and red from hours of crying, she eventually fell asleep, clinging to a fragile thread of hope, believing that perhaps the palace might offer her a brief moment of peace, safety, and rest, something she had never known at home. When morning came, Rhea packed large boxes overflowing with jewelry that sparkled even in dim light, perfumes with rich floral scents, elegant gowns made from fine fabrics, and accessories chosen with the precision of someone preparing for royalty, while Lina stood aside with nothing to pack at all, her belongings consisting only of the faded dress she had worn so many times that the fabric had thinned. And as she stepped outside, quietly ready to follow Rhea despite her simplicity, Helena suddenly struck her sharply across the face, shouting that she would not allow Lina to go and expose the truth about her mistreatment, threatening that if anyone at the palace asked about her, Rhea would simply claim that Lina had cursed the king and the prince and refused to come. Rhea, standing proudly beside her mother, laughed cruelly and told Lina that perhaps in her next life she would finally be blessed with a real mother, and then, with cold indifference, both mother and daughter turned away, leaving Lina standing alone in the doorway, tears blurring her vision, her heart shattered into pieces, and whatever hope she had managed to gather the night before, crushed beneath their cruelty. Moments later, Mina arrived and immediately sensed that something was terribly wrong. Upon seeing Lina's swollen eyes and realizing she had made no preparations for travel, she demanded to know what had happened, and Lina, unable to keep her pain inside any longer, broke down completely and revealed everything: the slap, the threats, the lies, the years of mistreatment, and Helena's plan to prevent her from reaching the palace. Mina, horrified and furious at the injustice, warned Helena that if she did not allow Lina to go immediately, she would personally stand before the king and expose every truth Helena had tried to bury. And the mere thought of public disgrace and royal punishment terrified Helena into compliance, prompting her to reluctantly allow Lina to take a proper bath and forcing herself to toss a few of Raya's discarded clothes toward her, not out of kindness, but out of fear of consequences. When Lina finally reached the palace gates, tired from walking and trembling with anxiety, the guard hesitated, unsure whether he was allowed to admit someone arriving late and unprepared. But after speaking with the king, he returned with unexpected kindness, telling Lina that she was permitted to enter, and for the first time in her life, Lina stepped into a place where she would be allowed to sleep in a bed that felt safe, within walls that did not echo insults, cruelty, or pain. What none of the girls knew was that the king, wise and observant, had secretly installed discreet cameras throughout the palace, not for entertainment, but as a quiet method of witnessing the girls' true personalities when they believed no one of importance was watching, because he understood that real character was revealed in small, unguarded moments. Within days, Raya's jealousy toward Lina grew, fueled by the sight of palace servants developing genuine affection for Lina, who naturally helped with cooking, sweeping, cleaning, and dishwashing, performing each task with kindness and humility, never seeking praise or attention. By the second week of the palace stay, the competition became more intense, and the true personalities of the girls began to shine through more clearly. Two of them, Jara and Femi, were expelled. Jara for her constant troublemaking, disrespect, and disregard for palace rules, and Femi after becoming pregnant by a palace guard, an action the king deemed highly inappropriate for someone who wished to become queen. Fearing that Raya's chances of winning might slip through her fingers, Helena turned to darker methods and smuggled a magical charm into the palace, along with written instructions explaining how Raya should use it. Raya followed the instructions exactly, pressing the charm against her tongue, and the next morning, the moment she stepped before the prince and greeted him, the enchantment took hold instantly, clouding his mind, weakening his will, and making him obey her every word without understanding why, giving Raya the confidence to walk through the palace as though she already wore the crown, issuing commands and reveling in the prince's unnatural support. Meanwhile, Lina, ignorant of magic, schemes, and manipulation, slowly began to open her heart to the palace's head guard, Tariq, whose calm strength and gentle words made her feel safe in a way she had never felt before. She confided in him, revealing her painful past, her mother's death, her father's helplessness, Helena's cruelty, and her deep desire to withdraw from the competition entirely, because she believed she was unworthy of the prince and only wished to work humbly in the palace kitchen, where people appreciated her efforts and treated her with respect. Tariq listened with patience and compassion, and what Lina did not yet know, what no one else in the palace knew, was that Tariq was actually Prince Eldrin himself, disguised among his own guards so he could observe the girls without influence, rank, or illusion. Later, when Lina was given the chance to cook for the palace, the king and the prince tasted her food and were astonished by the depth, balance, and warmth of every dish, because it was more than cooking. It was a reflection of her soul, infused with patience, discipline, resilience, and sincere kindness. The king, deeply moved by her authenticity and by all he had witnessed through the cameras, became increasingly convinced that Lina was the woman destined to stand beside his son as queen. The long-awaited day of the final ceremony arrived far sooner than anyone expected, and villagers from every corner of Nakuru gathered in the palace courtyard to witness the prince's decision. Raya sparkled in a dazzling gown that glittered like a jewel in the sunlight. Zena looked refined and elegant in her own fine attire, and Lina, who owned no jewels, gold, or expensive fabrics, wore a simple but neat outfit gifted by Mina, and although modest, she radiated a natural, effortless grace that could not be overshadowed by wealth or decoration. As the ceremony began, the king stepped forward and addressed the crowd, reminding them that they had all known Tariq as the head guard for years, but that there was a truth hidden from them. The crowd murmured in confusion until the king revealed that Tariq was, in reality, Prince Eldrin himself, who had disguised his identity to observe the girls honestly and without pretense. And as soon as these words were spoken, gasps of disbelief and shock rippled through the courtyard. Raya collapsed dramatically to the ground, and Helena's face drained of all color. Prince Eldrin then stepped forward with calm authority and declared before the entire village that his heart had chosen, and that the future queen of Nakuru would be Lina, the very girl who had been despised, overworked, silenced, and treated as nothing in her own home. Lina stood frozen, struggling to comprehend what she was hearing, until tears filled her eyes and slid down her cheeks as Prince Eldrin gently approached, lifted her chin, wiped away her tears with tender hands, and called for a royal gown to be draped over her shoulders, at which point the crowd erupted into applause, cheering her name and celebrating the recognition of a worth that had always lived within her, despite years of cruelty. Meanwhile, Helena and Raya, unable to face the humiliation and collapse of their schemes, fled the palace in disgrace, their ambitions shattered and their reputation stained by their own actions. Months later, Raya discovered that she was pregnant, not by the prince as she had once believed, but by the man Helena had paid to impersonate one, and thus she entered motherhood alone, forced to confront the consequences of greed and deception, while Lina, once a neglected and broken orphan, blossomed into Nakuru's beloved future queen, standing proudly beside Prince Eldrin as living proof that destiny may be delayed but cannot be destroyed by cruelty, and that true worth, no matter how deeply buried, will always rise into the light. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, leave a warm comment to support my work, and tell me which country you're watching from.